Go to your happy place. It's your birthday, Christmas. Or if you're wealthy, just another Tuesday. Ooh, that's a big present. I wonder what that is. Maybe it's that brand new console you've been waiting all year for. It's the best day of your... Oh my god, here comes your first game! Ah! Don't worry, we've all been there. We all thought we'd be getting masterpieces straight out of the box, but instead we're subjected to Steel Diver, Knack, Breath of the Wild.
Despite never getting a console on launch day, sometimes getting them years after the library had grown, somehow I still find myself with some shitters killing my excitement for the new system. But where to begin? Cubics Racing Robots, Monster House, Ratatouille, FIFA 13. Even though I have had a mad binge on it recently, I had a very regrettable season with Arsenal.
Well, you know, guys, that's football. It's been a hard season for all of us, me in particular. I just don't think the players came together as a team today. I don't think they've come together as a team throughout the whole season, but you know, saying that, it is a team game, it's all about the team, and I think the team have done everything the team can possibly do to help the team. I'm also helping the team. It's been a long road to get here. I've been with this group of lads for about 3 years now, and I know they have the drive to do well, so let's all just continue our support of the team, and the team, but also probably, and most not likely, also the team. Anyway, the first day of a new system that will always stick with me is the Game Boy Advance SP.
I was so flippin' excited for this thing. I didn't even know what games were on it, but just having a gaming system on the go blew my 9-year-old mind. I'd seen my fellow kids at school with Game Boys and Game Boy Colors, but for whatever reason it never really occurred to me to ask for one for myself. But when I caught sight of it in the Argos catalogue, it's all I stared at for around 6 weeks before I got it for my birthday.
I beat my grandparents and they didn't even have to try and entertain me. They just have to flip open the catalogue, throw it at me, and I'd just stare at it for the rest of the weekend.
I think part of my excitement was the fact I thought it was some kind of mini laptop. In fact, when I first got the system, I tried to play it like this.
I quickly gave up on that idea. I actually cried of happiness the day I finally got it. And my parents were also crying, with laughter, at me.
Unfortunately, in my excitement, I hadn't realised that the game my parents got me with the console was Scooby-Doo and the Cyberchase. Now, in all honesty, I can't really even remember much about the game. I played it for a little bit, and while it luckily didn't kill my excitement outright, as I was still amazed I could game on the toilet, it did dampen the mood somewhat. Luckily though, my beautiful Nana came through 2 hours later when she walked in with Crash Bandicoot 2 N-Tranced. Yes, this is what I wanted! Fuck! The game completely hooked me, and I didn't put it down all day. Combined with this and the fact I went to town and I got Pokemon Ruby and Sonic Advance 2 that weekend, I never touched Scooby-Doo and the Cyberchase again. I don't even really know how my nana would have known I wanted this. Maybe she saw how much I loved Crash 1 on the PS1 and then just naturally saw Crash Bandicoot 2 and picked that up. At the time I thought this was the second Crash Bandicoot game, not Cortex Strikes Back. I was quite sheltered to gaming news, so despite the fact the first game was already around 6 years old when I got it, I didn't know the PS1 sequels existed until around 2006.
So N-Tranced is actually a sequel to Crash Bandicoot XS, which came out a couple years earlier. N-Tranced actually managed to stay one of my favourite games on the console, which says a lot when 90% of the time, if you looked at what was in my Game Boy Advance, it'll be a Pokemon game. So today let's take a look at the game that saved that fateful day, starting with the developer.
Vicarious Visions, a developer who over a decade after making these games would be the one to bring Crash back after a long hiatus with the Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy. A glorious remake of the first 3 games in one collection. Not only did they have to remake the levels from scratch due to the original game's source code no longer being available, they also got very positive feedback from the original developers Naughty Dog. The game became the definitive way to play those games, and it's still one of the best remakes out there in my opinion. My only issue with it being that you couldn't change the original soundtrack, while the new remastered one is still great.
But how did their first venture in the Crash franchise fare? Well, let's start off with XS first, as it was the first out of the two of them.
Now this is the one I have next to no personal attachment to. I only got this game a few years ago at a market when I was visiting friends, and I don't think I ever really finished it, so this is going to be all new to me. So the story here is that Uka Uka is a little bit cross with Cortex after all his failures to get rid of that infernal Bandicoot, using pictures from Crash 3. But this time around Cortex has the plan to shrink the planet to the size of a bouncy ball. He could have just crushed it there and then with his massive Homer Simpson's hands, but then we'd have a game shorter than the Order 1886. So with Aku Aku and Coco's help, even though she's never playable in this game, Crash heads off to find crystals which will help him reverse the effects of the shrink ray. It's essentially the same setup as Crash 2 and 3 from the PS1 trilogy. You go through level to level, collecting the crystal found somewhere near the end, and if you manage to break all the boxes, you receive a gem as well. Now this is a tried and true formula, so I'm not knocking it, but it would be nice to see something a little different. From my personal perspective, I hadn't really seen this formula until N-Tranced, but for people already familiar with the PS1 classics, I imagine this could be a bit samey. Saying that though, the format is perfect for a handheld system, being able to play 1 or 2 levels at a time, maybe grab a couple of gems too, and then put it down for a bit. You select which level you'd like to play in these hub worlds, very reminiscent of Crash 3, being able to select any of the 5 levels in the world you're currently in. Once you've got all 5 crystals, you'll be able to face the boss, rinse and repeat until the game is won. If you've never played a Crash game before, the gist is to make your way through these levels jumping on enemies, avoiding hazards, and of course, breaking boxes. Boxes are pretty central to Crash's level design. Sometimes they're just there waiting to be broken, and hearing that break sound, it never gets old. Most of the time you'll get Wumpa Fruit from these, and getting 100 will get you an extra life, which you're going to need because this game, while not as difficult as the original trilogy, does offer some tricky platforming that will test your mettle. Not every box is a friend. In fact, the nefarious TNT and Nitro crates will most likely be the things that give you bother, whether it's needing to activate the TNT, then run away before it detonates, or finding a way around the insta-kill Nitro crates. Luckily you have a friend in the form of Aku Aku who, once free from his crate, will protect you from 1 extra hit. Get 3 of these and you'll be temporarily invincible and cleave through enemies and crates with ease. If you die too many times, the game will also spawn you back in with Aku Aku. An unwanted super guide? Oh, no! To be fair, I actually like this as it can really help, especially if you're going for those coveted gems, which feel amazing to get after a long level or puzzle in box formation. These are mostly found in bonus rounds you'll find in some levels. Luckily you don't lose lives from dying here, and it's a good thing too because this is where the trial and error Crash games are known for come into play the most. Take this one here. First you have to jump onto this box just right to get between the 2 TNTs to jump onto this box to be able to hit this box above it. If you manage that, then you'll have to deal with a few more TNTs, but remember to go back to the hard crates that they didn't blow up, and then don't get tempted by the shiny metal crate that you normally want to hit, as it's a trap that will lock you out of these boxes here. Then narrowly avoid these nitros while getting the boxes below, then jump onto this box and pray you get a high enough jump to get this box, and there you go. If you mess up any of that segment, you have to kill yourself and start all over again. I quickly decided on this playthrough if I wanted to keep my sanity, I wouldn't be going after all the gems. If you do decide to though, however, you will be getting the secret final boss, which is Megamix. He's actually a character from Crash Team Racing Nitro Fuel, which I was really confused to where he came from, but I guess now I know. Every day's a school day. I'm not actually that good at platformers because I just don't have the patience. I look at situations like this and say,
I don't like you.
Or this and say,
no.
Another reason is the colour gems. These gems are secret ones you'll find in some levels that give you access to hidden areas and other levels that act as bonus rounds to get more hidden gems. I'm usually really not a fan of when platformers that don't have a focus on exploration force you to come back to previous levels once you've got a new ability or an item so you can get something new. It plays in my gamer OCD something fierce, and this game is a fine example of this issue. Speaking of, you do indeed gain new abilities once you've beaten a boss, being the super body slam, the double jump which you can only do at the apex of your first jump and can be a bit finicky, and there's also the death tornado and the sprint shoes. This leads me into the inconsistencies with the movement in this game. The death tornado allows you to glide across certain gaps if you get enough height and mash the ever living shit out of the B button. However, sometimes you'll still drop like a stone, and it's just one of the many times the game feels a bit unresponsive. In the swimming levels when you spin, you're supposed to get a small speed boost that propels you forward, but sometimes you just sit there spinning like an invalid. The double jump, while more consistent, is also quite strict with when you can activate it. Sometimes you can do it a second after you've reached the tip top of your jump, whereas sometimes you need to do it as soon as you're at your highest point. The slide jump is an insanely fun technique that allows you to jump forward with momentum that sort of reminds you of the long jump from some 3D Mario games. But here the jump part just doesn't work sometimes. It either just cuts the slide short and you drop, or you barely get any slide at all, meaning you end up just doing a regular jump. This is already really quite frustrating, but then you combine it with the utter trickery of the game's presentation. For starters, the crates and platforms you see are not accurately communicated to the player. What you're seeing is this, but what's really here is this. So when you try and get closer to the edge of the platform for a longer jump, prepare to scream in frustration as you drop through the edge of a platform. This will make you miss time and miss jumps a lot, and it's probably the reason why the slide jump is so unreliable. But that's not all, the foregrounds can also intrude on the game, most of the time obscuring something so you miss a crate or just can't see where you're going. In fact, hitboxes in general can be confusing. I went through this squid so many times I thought he was just part of the background, and then he killed me!
Gotcha.
I know Crash is known for its trial and error gameplay, but this takes it a bit far. Tricking the player in this way is not fun as it feels like they're taking a piss. Which brings me to the time relics. So the Speedy Gonzales shoes are mainly used for getting the time relics that, like every Crash game they've been in, I've never really bothered with. It might be something I'll do someday, but speedrunning Crash levels isn't something that I've ever really been interested in. especially in this game where you're being tricked and sometimes you can't even see where you're going. Because of the Game Boy Advance's small screen, sometimes the game will ask you to take some leaps of faith. Now this is strange because sometimes the game will have some Wumpa fruit so you know whereabouts to go, and then other times it'll just make you blind.
I'm blind! I'm blind!
This can also lead to some questionable enemy placement, which aren't bad per se, you do have time to react to them, but some enemies shoot things and they can come out of nowhere. Another reason why I don't really think the relics fit well with the game's level design. In the 3D games you can at least see what's coming so you can react accordingly. Here it wants you to slow down sometimes, kind of like 2D Sonic games actually. Going back to the enemies, for the most part they're great. These are actually how you see a lot of Crash's unique death animations.
Oh, SpongeBob! Why?
The frogs give you gangrene. A lot of the enemies are original designs for this game, however there are still quite a few taken from the original trilogy. Look, Mario can get away with putting Goombas everywhere because they're iconic characters. Having this guy from one of the space levels in Crush 2, then putting him in the space levels in this game is not because it's iconic, it's just a bit lazy. It's not just enemies that return, but also some level gimmicks. Taking inspiration from Crush 3 Warped, if inspiration looked like this, XS has some levels that aren't just side-scroll platforming. There's swimming and shooting levels along with some regular levels having chase sequences. Weirdly enough, unlike Crash 3, I don't mind these levels at all really. They're a nice change of pace after a few platforming levels. For the most part they don't have many boxes to break and are fairly short, and the chase sequences also aren't full levels, which to be honest I wouldn't have minded having. I don't know if my tolerance for these level gimmicks has increased over the years, but I actually really don't mind these now and find them quite fun, especially the shooting levels. The way the Game Boy Advance handles the chase sequences in particular is very impressive. Full 2.5D movement in the Game Boy Advance's first year. I would have liked to have seen more when it comes to the themes however. There's not too many here, with temples, jungles and snow levels being pretty generic and leaning heavily once again on the themes Crash 2 already did. With how standard these themes are, they could have created a world map like in Crash 1. In Crash 2 and 3, the warp rooms allowed for the locations of the game to be whatever they wanted, instead of tied to a specific theme. Here though it's played so safe, I feel the only thing going against the world map idea is the space levels, which stick out like a sore thumb. Graphically speaking, XS looks incredible. The backgrounds are super detailed, and even though the themes are a bit on the generic side, it's not like these areas aren't pleasant to look at. The character sprites look absolutely top notch. Crash himself has over 1000 frames of animation. Every boss and enemy also moves very fluidly. Unfortunately, if you compare this game to other platformers on the system like the Sonic Advance games, you can see which one is aged better. XS has a few wrinkles, that's for sure. I think it's a case of looking incredible at the time, but the amount of detail did make it age not poorly, but just not as well. Now coming on to the music, it uses new compositions for Crash 2's music. More inspiration, I guess. I gotta say, I found this soundtrack to not be bad, but it's also not very memorable either. I actually had to go back and re-listen to some of the tunes so I had some sort of opinion. They do the job, but it's not my favourite soundtrack by any means. It might also be because I didn't find Crash 2's music in the first place to be all that great. It's good, it's just not as good as the other two games in the trilogy, so therefore I don't really have much to say about it here. What is notable however is that Shinnen were the devs who arranged the music, the makers of Fast RMX and The Tourist, two games that are brilliant soundtracks, when music bothered to play in The Tourist case. So XS overall, I gotta say I enjoyed. The levels are well designed, the core Crash gameplay is as fun as ever, it's still a bit to 100%, but that wasn't a huge deal to me. The boss fights are great and the power-ups are fun to use. The game does have a truckload of issues though, mostly to do with how the visuals trick you into making inconsistent jumps, and some of the moves being too finicky to consistently rely on. The game looks great and sounds just okay, and I do really like the premise. It's just a shame it's essentially a mishmash of Crash 2 and 3 put onto the Game Boy Advance with little originality. They're brand new levels, don't get me wrong, but it's wearing the clothes of another game and that's a big shame. I don't usually care much about originality, but here it's not masked well and it can be distracting. The back of the box says Classic Crash, and I think that's pretty spot on. It's its own thing, but it takes so much from the PS1 Classic that it results in this really weird end product where it's its own game, but you can't help feeling you've done it all before. So let's see if Crash Bandicoot 2 N-Tranced can fix that. It doesn't. If XS took more from Crash 2, then N-Tranced takes more from Crash 3. And in a surprise twist, Wrath of Cortex. But before we take a look at what's new, let's have a look at what's the same. That will be the core gameplay, running through levels, collecting crystals, gems you break all the boxes, and if you want something else to do, the time relics, as they don't actually contribute to the true ending this time, they are completely optional. Everything that worked in XS is here, and everything that didn't. The problems with the inaccuracies for the visuals, like with platforms and boxes, is still here, and some enemies still blend into the background.
Oh well. That ain't the invisible cunt.
This time around, the game sort of reverts back to Crash 1's progression via a world. Holy shit, the music in this game. I absolutely love Crash 3's soundtrack anyway, but these rearrangements I think are even better. They're just really energetic and they have more going on without compromising the tone of the tracks. They were once again composed by Shinen, who absolutely knocked it out of the park here. Anyway, there isn't much to the map, it's just going from level to level really, and it's not exactly aesthetically pleasing. I would say I prefer it to XS's method, but I could take either really. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. All of this is to stop the new villain of the game, N-Tranced, who, after being hired by Entropy and Uka Uka, transports Coco and Crunch. Oh, I guess this takes place after Wrath of Cortex. Anyway, Crash is saved at the last minute by Aku Aku, resulting in...
It's hideous!
How Fake Crash came to be is actually a cool story. So the developers saw some bootleg Crash products in the East looking like... that, and decided to make him an official character. Now while we're on characters... God, I do miss Crunch. I hope he can come back in future Crash games. I know we haven't seen much of him past...
Get over here, you little orange sponge! Cause we're gonna wring you out.
But I do really like him. He's got a metal arm for Christ's sake. He's practically a Winter Soldier. Despite Cortex not making an appearance in this game, he's there in spirit. Wrath of Cortex's influence is all over this game, mainly in the new gameplay styles there are in some platforming levels. In the Arabian levels, sometimes you'll have to ride this magic carpet, complete with Aladdin Crash.
I can show you the world, swimming, stranded.
These segments are simple, but do break up the gameplay in a fun way, and there's no levels completely dedicated to them, which I do think would be overkill. The same can be said for the helipack parts of the Tiki levels. I do prefer the helipack overall, just because you have full control instead of having to constantly move forward with an auto-scroller. However, there is a little delay when moving the carpet up or down, and it can screw you over in the later levels. Another Wrath of Cortex edition are the rolling ball levels, where you play as Crunch after defeating him. These are super impressive visually, going for a more 2.5D isometric look. There are depth perception issues though. Look at this crate and tell me if it's on the ground or in the air. Barrels can also be confusing, since they can hide behind ramps you can't see. These levels overall are okay, but can be a tad slow, especially when you want to get all the boxes. The chase levels are also bad. I'm surprised I didn't go back to Scooby-Doo. Jesus, this is terrifying. Maybe it's because I have a rational fear of the sea anyway, but holy crap, and this is only the second level of the game. The other chase levels become available after saving Coco. Here you have to keep ahead of the sun while shooting down anything in your path. It's the shooting levels from XS with a twist. So yeah, N-Tranced is a lot more varied than XS, a bit like how Crash 3 is more varied than Crash 2. I don't think any of them are complete misses here though. Sure, I'd rather have straight platforming through the entire game, but maybe it's because I've played these back to back, but it's kinda nice having something different to do every couple levels. A big improvement this game makes is the colour gems. This time around you find shards hidden in certain levels. No, I said gems! Once you've found 4 shards of the same colour, you'll unlock one of 3 bonus levels near the end of the game. The best bit is these shards are pretty comfortable to nab. There's no backtracking or requiring other gems to come back later, none of that nonsense. After the bonus levels, you'll be able to fight the true final boss of the game, Entropy, whose fight is almost exactly like the one from Crash 3, but when you're in a 2D space, it is more challenging. There's 3 phases to the fight, and the annoying thing is, if you mess up on the 3rd phase, you're sent back to phase 1, by which point it is extremely slow. Overall though, the bosses in N-Tranced are really quite good. Each one has a different gameplay style attached to it, which I think they needed because the bosses in XS were okay, but the shift for this game I appreciated. Crunch you face on the carpet, Coco in the helipack, and Fake Crash copies your every move, so you have to try and run into spikes without them catching you, yourself. N-Tranced is definitely the most fun one. Its first form is pretty standard, hops about and gets a little tired, but the second phase you have to Beyblade his disembodied head underneath a lever where Fake Crash pours lava on him.
What can I say?
This time Crash gets new power-ups from the bosses, including a super slippy slide. There's also the rocket jump, which replaces the crouch jump from XS, and holy shit, you go flying. And then there's the Death Tornado and the speedy shoes returning from XS. I will say, N-Tranced doesn't really make use of power-ups as much as XS did. There are very few times where it's required to make use of ones like a Death Tornado, which is strange, because you have the double jump on the super belly flop from the start this time, so you would have thought they would have designed levels with those in mind a bit more.
Now the last thing N-Tranced has is, weirdly enough, multiplayer. It's split into Atmosphere and Link Race. Link Race is exactly what it sounds like, you race to the end of the level. Atmosphere though is a bit weirder, you get in the balls from the ball levels and you have to push each other into nitro crates. You might guess that I couldn't show footage of this, and that's because you're required to have 2 copies of the game, which I don't have. The cool thing about Atmosphere is that you can actually play as many different characters, and if you connect to XS via a link cable, you can actually get some of the characters from that game as well. Even though on the back of the box it says link to Crash Bandicoot XS to unlock secret levels, and more.
You're lying!
Here's N-Tranced in a ball. I don't think even Lucifer will punish his enemies this way. So there's N-Tranced, and while it still borrows heavily from Crash 3 and some elements of Wrath of Cortex, I do believe this one to be the better of the two. Its bosses are more exciting, the levels are more fun to play due to the more vivid themes and excellent soundtrack, and most of all, it's just a more comfortable experience. It's weird to say because I got more game overs with N-Tranced, but I do think it is the easier game, in the sense of trying to get all the collectibles anyway. There's a lot less crates in this game because of all the weird gimmick levels, but combine that with the ease of getting the coloured gem shards, I much prefer this to the ball ache of XS. So while I do prefer N-Tranced, probably due to nostalgia, let's be real here, I do think both of these games have been underrated for a really long time, and understandably so, because they can just be seen as Crash 2 and 3, but lesser. But I do feel there is enough to be enjoyed here, even on the game's own merits. And since we didn't get many good Crash games after the original trilogy, I think it's best that we savour the good ones that we did get, even if they fly a bit close to copied homework in some areas. With all that said though, it's not like these games offer anything new to the Crash series, or platformers in general, and in a world now where we can play the original trilogy on a handheld, and newer games in the series too, I do find these games to be a harder sell. But by God, are they the answer to the Antichrist. Oh no! Let the power of Crash compel you!